welcome, Ivan, to this event. We're very delighted to have you here in Islington North. On behalf of Islington Labour, and on behalf of Jeremy Corbyn, the local MP, and Emily Thornberry, MP for Islington South, I welcome you to this event. And on behalf of the leader of the council as well, Councillor Catherine West, and my colleague councillors are just there, Councillor Richard Watt, Councillor Mick O'Sullivan, Islington councillors, and we welcome you to this event about the DRC. And I'd like to welcome you all to this fantastic event, which is, to me, an event that is symbolizing the beginning of a very close relationship between the British people and the Congolese people, as we need to build strong ties and between the two countries. And above all, we need to increase bilateral relations between the DRC and the UK for the sake of the DRC stabilization. As you might be aware, the DRC is a country that has been through quite a lot for many decades. Wars, conflicts, dictatorship, and even massive violations of human rights. And this is a country that has suffered quite a lot since King Leopold. The journey has been very dark through colonization, occupation, invasion from foreign countries. Then these foreign countries came to kill, rape women and girls, to proceed with the illegal exploitation of the DRC's vast mineral wealth, therefore violating the UN Charter and international law. The lack of international leadership in focusing properly on the DRC is a key element while assessing the situation of the DRC overall. As I've just mentioned, since the Congo Free State and the King Leopold, and through the Belgian colonization, and to today's DRC troubles. The lack of national leadership as well is a major problem for the DRC. This is stopping the DRC to be making progress toward peace, democracy, with decentralization of power, devolution of power in the region, and a major hurdle toward development of the DRC, which is a country that should normally making progress toward being a powerhouse in Africa, given the DRC's vast mineral resources and opportunities to help economic regional integration, to help on commercial exchanges, trade, and financial exchanges with countries in the region. And we really welcome you to be with here today. And as you been to Goma recently and to Kinshasa, we are particularly keen to hear from you about addressing the following issues about gender-based violence, especially with the G8 commitment to tackle sexual violence, disarmament, demobilization, in relation to the recent UN Security Council resolution, authorizing for the first time an offensive mission to achieve a full disarmament. And we would like to hear from you about how to increase DFID humanitarian assistance to the DRC. And another issue would be about rebuilding the DRC state institutions, particularly the National Army, National Police Force, and how to help to increase bilateral cooperation by helping the DRC toward processes such as joining regional, I think, organizations in the region, and even the process of the DRC to join, for instance, the Commonwealth, which would be very interesting. And this is my introduction today. And we would like now, I would like now to invite you, as you are the shadow Secretary of State for International Development. And you've been recently to the DRC. So I think the audience here would like to hear about you on addressing those key issues I've just mentioned. So welcome. Welcome to Ivan Lewis. Ivan Lewis, ladies and gentlemen, Ivan Lewis.
John, thank you very much for that warm welcome. I'm really delighted to have the opportunity of being here in Islington. I normally spend my weekends in Manchester, so the contrast between Manchester and Islington is quite interesting. It'll be interesting to see what it's like on a Friday night. I'm delighted that Islington Labour Party has made this event possible, but I guess there are people here of all political persuasions and none. This is an incredibly complex and challenging issue. When I became a minister in the Department for International Development in 2008, I didn't know anything about the Democratic Republic of Congo, nor indeed very much about Africa. Previously, I'd been a minister in various government departments during the period of Labour's time in government. So I was an education minister from 2001 to 2005, a Treasury minister 2005 to 2006, and a health minister from 2006 to 2008. So when Gordon Brown asked me to become the Minister for Africa in the Department for International Development, I didn't really know what to expect. Very quickly, I developed a particular interest in specific issues. And I have to say one of them was the part of Africa where the DRC is, and particularly the dynamic relationship between Rwanda and DRC. I visited twice during that period, so I was a minister in DFID between 2008 and 2009. I then went on to the Foreign Office for the final year that Labour was in government. Initially, I visited predominantly Rwanda and then spent a small amount of time in Goma, which is just over the border in the east of DRC. And then the second visit I made was quite a significant visit where I spent quite a lot of time in the east, but also in Kinshasa. And the reason I did that visit was we were at the time producing a white paper on the way that we felt we needed to change our approach to working in so-called fragile and conflict-ridden states. And I was writing that chapter, and we felt that DRC was almost the perfect case study, really. First of all, because, frankly, the world has got it wrong over such a long period of time. But secondly, because we obviously wanted to ensure that future policy was more effective. More recently, I've been, again, twice. So in the last 12 months, I spent a visit in Bukavu to look at mainly children and family type issues. And then I went again where I spent quite a lot of time in both Goma and Kinshasa in the last 2 or 3 months. The first thing I would like to say is Jean is absolutely right about the international community. The reason that the international community, in my view, doesn't take the horrendous suffering, loss of life, abuses of human rights that have taken place in DRC as seriously as they should is because there is no direct threat to the West emanating from the DRC. So if you think about it, there's no Al-Qaeda activity, there's no terrorist organization that threatens directly the security of the West. And unfortunately, as a consequence of that, this is my opinion, the West has turned a blind to some of the worst atrocities that we have seen anywhere in any part of the world. And that is entirely unacceptable and I believe needs to change. The situation on the ground, what saddens me is that the situation in 2013 is no better than the situation I found in 2008 and 2009. We were told after 2008 and 2009, when there'd been an outbreak of violence, that there was a determination to see progress, to see stability, to see political resolution, to see an improvement between the relationships between the neighbouring countries. I'm afraid in reality what happened was that whilst there was an agreement reached, a political agreement reached, involving not just DRC and Rwanda, but the neighbours, that agreement was never properly implemented and delivered. And as a consequence of that, you have the same problems. What are those problems? Well, first of all, from a security point of view, there is no security or law and order as we know it in the east of DRC. It is like, frankly, the Wild West. The consequences of that are, as Jean said, the most appalling gender-based violence. Rape is a weapon of war that is used almost on a daily basis. Violence against women is has become a norm in that part of DRC, with complete impunity, no consequences, no justice system, no sanction against the men who behave in that way. Secondly, there is the humanitarian crisis, almost a permanent, perpetual humanitarian crisis. People fleeing their homes, people displaced, some living with families, others living in refugee camps. I visited one of the refugee camps, 30,000 civilians. Ironically, 2008 and 2009, there were 30,000 people there. That then reduced to about 5,000 people. We're now back to 30,000 people fleeing because of militia activity, because of the fear that brings. So a tremendous humanitarian crisis just in terms of basics like food, hunger, nutrition, access to education and health, very, very little employment. And by the way, there's a correlation between some of these issues. If you've got young men roaming the streets with nothing to do, that doesn't help to tackle some of the other issues that I've just referred to. So there's terrible poverty, terrible humanitarian crisis, and very little significant economic growth. Although, interestingly, what you notice is there are a lot of people trying to engage in enterprise. So there is obviously the potential in terms of an entrepreneurial type culture. Should the security situation be like that? Well, no, there are 17,000 UN troops in the east of DRC. It's the largest UN battalion anywhere in the world. It's called MONUSCO. Alongside that, there are thousands of army personnel and police officers from the DRC security services. The reality, however, is that whenever violence flares up, we recently saw the activities of the so-called M23, clearly, as demonstrated by the UN, aided and abetted, sadly, by the Rwandan government. When that happened, the UN forces went into retreat, didn't engage, didn't protect the civilian population, didn't try and force the militias back. And I'm afraid the DRC army and police are not paid, are not clothed, are not fed, are not housed, are not professional. So although there are thousands of people there who are meant to be delivering a basic level of security, the reality is whenever there is a threat, whenever there is an outbreak of violence, that so-called security infrastructure just completely evaporates. And as a result of that, the fear, as I said a few moments ago, amongst the civilian population is horrendous, and people end up having to flee and experiencing complete lack of protection. So until that situation is resolved, in my view, you will never have long-term stability and security in that part of DRC. It has been agreed, as Jean said, that the mandate of the UN force in the future will be able to be more assertive, and they will be supplemented, as I understand it now, by a battalion that will come from African Union countries that will have a very clear and specific role, which I believe will be more professional. So that is some progress. But the irony is there are more United Nations troops there anywhere than anywhere in the world, and yet it has failed to protect the civilian population because of in my view, a lack of political will. You might ask me, well, I've explained to you why the DRC army is so ineffective and the police. Why are the UN force so ineffective? Well, the answer is because lots of countries nominate people to go and serve because they want to find a way of paying their own soldiers and troops. But the deal is we don't want any of our soldiers and troops to engage in any serious fighting because we don't want any stories back home about loss of life and all the rest of it. So, in a sense, it's fine as a force when there's not much happening, but as soon as there's a real threat, it's irrelevant. And I have to say, even when there isn't militia activity, in terms of protecting women against violence, as I referred to earlier, they haven't been very effective in fulfilling that role either. So security is absolutely essential. Getting that improved and resolved is crucial to long-term stability. But that alone, I'm afraid, will be nowhere near enough to bring progress in Eastern DRC. There has to be political change. Now, what do I mean by political change? Well, I think it falls into two categories. One is the relationship between the neighbours. We know the history, the horrendous history of what happened in Rwanda in 1994. And by the way, we should never, ever underestimate the impact that that has on a country and a people. It was one of the worst genocides in our history. And Rwanda is a remarkable country in view of that genocide that it suffered. Having said that, it has, on a perpetual basis, undoubtedly interfered in the DRC. Now, on occasions, that's been at the request of the government of DRC, remember. So during the last 3 or 4 years, there was an agreement to undertake joint operations to deal with the militia activities. And obviously, in those circumstances, it would be difficult to criticise because that was agreed. It was agreed by the two countries. But certainly, the most recent outbreak of violence was a unilateral act by Rwanda supporting a renegade breakaway brigade from the DRC forces. So a political process which involves an agreement, Rwanda, DRC, Uganda, and a wider range of African countries, frankly, is crucial. But the agreement isn't worth the paper it's written on unless that agreement on this occasion is enforced and monitored and made to work. So whilst we have an agreement in place now, I believe, it is absolutely essential that that is honoured and that there are consequences for those who would breach political agreement. I also think, frankly, secret private deals between two presidents is not what we need here. We need an open, transparent political process. And let's hope that that is now what we have. But the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. The other political dimension to this, of course, is, as Jean referred to, is the ineffectiveness of the government in Kinshasa. It is all too easy to blame all of the DRC's difficulties on Rwanda. Well, this is complete nonsense. Many of the DRC's problems are to do with a combination of very, very weak leadership and government in Kinshasa, the exploitation of the mineral resources by corrupt business people, corrupt politicians, but also multinational companies who are not held to account. So all of that has to be addressed. And if DRC continues to have a government, a president, a leadership that cannot govern the country and cannot build state institutions, it is destined to be a failing state on a perpetual basis. Now, having met numerous opposition leaders when I was in Kinshasa and opposition parties, I also have to be clear about that. There are about 500 opposition parties in DRC. Until those opposition parties learn, or some of them learn when they have a common agenda, to come together and to rally behind a leader, that is going to be incredibly difficult, I think, to have the kind of vibrant democracy. It's not for me to dictate who runs DRC or to tell people how to vote, but to have the kind of vibrant democracy where there are serious and credible alternatives. So there's external political processes that need to change, but also the situation within the country needs to change. And I'll address the last election in DRC. There is no doubt that there were many, many irregularities in the last election. The international community decided on balance those irregularities were not sufficient to describe the election outcome as illegitimate. For what it's worth, my own opinion is that that was a cop-out. And the international community decided it was safer to stick with what they knew in terms of the existing regime than risk change. And that's why, in the end, there was a reluctance from the diplomatic community to call the election as being illegitimate. The alternative view is that even if you accept some of the irregularities, the scale of the victory for the serving president was such that those irregularities would not have changed the result. And there will be a heated debate about that. But it's ironic that the previous election in DRC was much more transparent, democratic, and credible because the international community sent far more observers. Whereas this time, the international community decided that they wouldn't send as many. And I think, again, that was a seriously fundamental mistake. I mean, obviously, as you know, the leading opposition party is split. Some are refusing to participate in Parliament. Others have left the party and are participating as independents in Parliament. So it really is a very, very unstable internal political situation. The third issue I want to address, having dealt with defence, security and politics and diplomacy, is development aid and humanitarian assistance. I am incredibly frustrated by what I've seen since 2008 over the last 5 years. What we have is a permanent disaster response emergency humanitarian intervention in the east of DRC. We do not have a long-term vision for development. Now, what the international community will say is it's all too difficult. My challenge to them is, as long as you continue simply to put a sticky plaster on the situation, you will never, ever achieve the kind of advances that we need. So the donors, of which Britain is playing a really important part, Britain is the second largest bilateral aid giver to DRC. That was the case under Labour when we were in government, and it's the case under the current government. However, we are spending millions of pounds on a situation which is actually not getting any better. And all we are doing, as I say, is providing permanent humanitarian assistance. And I think that's partially, of course, the situation there is difficult and challenging. But when I was a minister back in 2009, we agreed as a government that we were going to shift a lot of the UK's resources from DRC generally to the east of the country. We were going to open an office there. We were going to provide some leadership amongst the donors. And we were really going to try and make things happen. I was there again only a couple of months ago, and I met the DFID people. I said, where is the office? Oh, well, we're still thinking about whether... This is 5 years on. And then people say, well, it's dangerous, it's difficult, but all the NGOs are there. So there is a real problem in terms of the donors. Now, the donors will say one of their challenges is they haven't got much of a government to work with. I mean, the recent changes that the President made post the most recent election, I think people had some faith in the new Prime Minister, perhaps, the new Finance Minister, and we still have some hope that they will begin to turn things around. But it has been incredibly difficult for the donor countries to work with a government which doesn't function. On the other hand, I don't think the donors are really taking it, having a focused, strategic approach. The other problem amongst the donors is that none of them are prepared to take leadership because they fear failure. So because they fear failure, none of the countries that could say, right, we are going to lead this. There's a difference between leadership and coordination. Of course, there's coordination in the sense that the donor countries sit around the same tables and talk. But in terms of leadership and vision and a strategy and saying, let's move beyond perpetual humanitarian to development, there's absolutely very little evidence of that. And I make this commitment here tonight, and this is not sort of spinach because I feel personally very passionately about this part of the world. One of the top priorities for me as an incoming Secretary of State in 2015 will be Eastern DRC and DRC and Rwanda. It will be, because I think it's completely unacceptable that just because people look at a narrow interest and say there is not a direct security threat, we are not prepared to prioritise a country where there are the most horrendous human rights abuses, the horrendous humanitarian crisis. If aid and development is going to work, the test of it should be actually working in places like DRC, in the most difficult of environment and context. So we have to do, I think, take a much greater level of leadership. I want to end with two stories or personal recollections which will stick with me for the rest of my life. One was meeting two women who had been the victims of the most horrendous rapes, who were still trying to rebuild their lives. They'll never recover, but trying to function even in a normal way. Both of these women, separately, were gang raped. One of them never saw her husband and her 3 children again. At the same time, they were taken away by a militia. The other one, her brother and mother were murdered at the same time that she was raped. Now, when you sit, it's all right talking about gender-based violence, sounds, you know, sort of very technical. But when you actually sit and you listen and try and understand what those women, I nearly said have been through, but go through every day. And that is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of impunity and violence against women. Then really the international community should reflect on its failures, as well as the responsibilities, of course, that the government of DRC and others have. The second visit that I did was to a youth project where they were doing vocational training with young people. And I was incredibly impressed by how articulate the young people I met. These were teenagers, perhaps from the age of 16 to the age of 18 or 19. And I met this group of young men, and I asked them about rape and violence against women and how they felt about it. And they looked at me and they said, they are our mothers and our sisters. And we hate it and we want it to stop. And this generation wants to see a different future for our country. The second thing they said to me, when I asked, what is it that you want? What is it more than anything that you want? They said 2 words time and time again: peace and jobs. Jobs and peace. And that is a very, very important message. If you go to the east of DRC and you see the state of the infrastructure, you're in Rwanda. Rwanda is the size of Wales. DRC is the size of Western Europe, just to give you, for those of you who don't know, a sense of the scale of this. You're in Rwanda and everything is ordered. The infrastructure is incredibly well developed. You go across the border and there are no roads to speak of. There's no infrastructure to speak of. And yet there is all these young people crying out for jobs. And DRC is a country with incredible access to resources, as you said, mineral resources. It should be one of the strongest, richest, most successful countries in that part of the world, when in fact it's the opposite. So I think that the solution to the problem is not simple and it's not straightforward and it's not trite. It's about a combination of security, politics and development, not humanitarian assistance, but development. And it's about the international community working with the governments, the relevant governments, and demanding that those governments fulfill their responsibility, but also making it clear that the international community will no longer turn a blind eye to the atrocities that are taking place in that part of Africa. Thank you very much.
Now, a question from the floor. Please stand up, say your name, and ask your question.
My name is Michel Kabwe. Mike for those who are close. I think you have gone there in Congo. You have found everything you have found there. I think it's not the first time. because since the genocide from Rwanda, it seems like it is the international community has given the right to Rwanda to do everything they can do in Congo. And from there, the international community can't see because of the genocide which happened in Rwanda. This is the first observation. And from this observation, what happened is, let me give you an image. Imagine if there is a barrel and there is a hole under this barrel and we want to fill it with water. What do we have to do first? I think the best the thing to do, the first thing to be done is first to look where the hole is and remove, put something, collect something to prevent water going through it, and after that you can fill the barrel. But since the international community doesn't look at this hole in this barrel, which means that yourself you have said it, there is a secret agreement between two presidents, which we can say yourself you know it, but maybe you don't want to say it.
Question, please.
Yeah, my question is coming there. I've already asked my question, which is when the barrel is a hole and we want to fill the water in there, what we have to do first? And I want now to show where the hole is. The hole is where there is a secret agreement between two presidents. This is, I think, there I've asked you a question and I give you also the answer to that question. What now, from your last trip from Congo, what now is your decision? What you have seen and what you have decided now to suggest to the international community to stop what is happening in Congo?
Yes.
I think yes, this is one question.
I mean, I think that on Rwanda, we need to be clear. The first thing is that there is no doubt that this country has had a special relationship with Rwanda over a significant period of time, both under our government, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, under David Cameron and Andrew Mitchell subsequently. We do admire and respect many of Rwanda's achievements. We think Rwanda has done remarkable things in the aftermath of a horrendous genocide. However, I also personally believe that President Kagame has sometimes seen that as a blank check, which has enabled him almost to do whatever he wanted in relation to both critics at home and his interference in Eastern DRC next door. And that's why when the government initially decided to suspend budget support payments to the government of Rwanda, as a response to the UN report which said they were supporting the M23's militia activity in Eastern DRC, we supported the government in that decision. We were then extremely concerned when Andrew Mitchell reversed it on the day he was leaving that job, and we called for it to be reinstated, the freezing of the budget support, and I'm pleased to say that we were listened to, and currently the budget support has been frozen. I think we need to send a very clear message to President Kagame that we do respect what you've achieved in Rwanda. We do think you've achieved a lot. We do regret the fact that there are many leaders in your part of the world that haven't achieved both the stability, the poverty reduction, and the growth that he's achieved. But that is not a blank check to abuse human rights and to destabilise the neighbouring country. I'd also, though, make the point that, and I said this in my opening remarks, that the idea that all of the DRC's problems are to do with Rwanda is a complete cop-out and an abdication of responsibility. Many of the DRC's problems are to do with an ineffective government that hasn't delivered for the people. Yes. And we have to be honest and clear about that. It's also true, the point that was made about oil and water, I'm not sure I quite got the barrel stuff, but in terms of the mineral resources, I mean, of course, that those mineral resources have been stolen in many, many cases. Now, who's responsible? I'm sure that Rwanda has had a role in this in the past. I also believe that the elite in DRC have played their part, as have multinational companies. So there has to be a new approach to protecting the integrity, the transparency of those resources. But I suspect that that only comes in the context of a new political settlement and proper security. So I think that that is the case. What have I done since I came back? Well, I've basically been saying very vociferously that we can't carry on like this, that business as usual is not acceptable, and that we have to have a new approach to security, diplomacy and development. And in terms of my distinct responsibilities, I am quite critical of the approach of the donors. As I said, I think that they have got to lift their ambitions and their aspirations from constant humanitarian interventions to doing some development there, to creating some jobs, to investing in the infrastructure, for getting the economy moving, for getting some of the basic services in place. I hope that deals with the question.
Minister, all that thing. Since I was 7 years of age, we've been giving aid to Africa, and nothing's getting any better, like, about the whole thing, like. So, with the big continent they have, why is it not getting better? And what's it? With these African leaders who are obviously corrupt, why ain't the government actually really, really coming down on them, really, in the real sense, like, and all that stuff, like? Because at the end of the day, like, is that, unfortunately, Africa doesn't seem to be able to produce their own kind of minerals and all that stuff as a society, like, I mean, it's a vast society, like, and all that stuff. So why is it like, and no disrespect or anything like that, they're near enough telling you to bugger off, really, aren't they, these leaders of Africa and all that stuff, like. They're not exactly, they don't give a damn whether you're, unless you're really going to say to them, like, we're going to make sanctions on you or something like that. And, I mean, let's be honest, most of these leaders has actually been trained by the British Army, haven't they? Being truthful.
First of all, it's very important to make the point Africa is not one country. And there are many parts of Africa, actually, that have made tremendous progress over the last 10, 20 years, both in terms of economic growth, in terms of poverty reduction, in terms of stability. So the presentation of Africa, we're here to talk about DRC tonight, which is why I guess there is a negative prism. But the presentation of Africa in the way that you've done so is not correct. Does that mean that there aren't difficulties and challenges? Of course there are. And to try and deal with those as best as I can, first of all, aid and development are only a part of the story. A massive part of the story is good governance and good politics and good state institutions that deliver. Alongside that is tax transparency, both in terms of multinational companies that frankly continue to rape and pillage in some cases developing countries, but also in terms of internal tax mechanisms to make sure people who can afford to are paying tax in the relevant countries. Alongside that, we still have a very unfair trade system globally. There's been very little progress in terms of the so-called Doha process, in terms of getting a more level playing field, a fairer trading environment. There is a new challenge of climate change, where developing countries need a lot of resource support to help them cope with the impact of climate change. And although the world has talked a good game, they haven't yet delivered the kind of additional support that is necessary. So there is a whole range of factors. Do I think corruption is an issue? Yeah. So we, as the Labour Party, have established an arm's length report that's being done for me at the moment on how, if we came into government in 2015, would be much tougher on corruption than has been the case hitherto. Now, the person doing that report for me has identified three things. First of all, she's identified, obviously, the conduct of politicians and civil servants in developing countries. But she's also identified that the conduct of multinational companies, the fact that we still have tax havens and tax dodging on a massive scale, and that we have collusion from our financial institutions, including in the City of London, with that corruption, are equally as important an issue as the so-called conduct of politicians and civil servants in some of the developing countries. So these issues are complicated, but but we need to get a proper sense of perspective. And, you know, there is a lot of debate about legacy at the moment. Mrs. Thatcher's legacy, Tony Blair's legacy, all sorts of legacies. Let's be clear about one thing. Whatever you think about what happened between 1997 and 2010, this country changed the world on development as a consequence of having a Labour government. There's absolutely no question of it. The world wrote off debt from the world's poorest countries. It was our leadership which ensured the resources were put in place to ensure that the Millennium Development Goals could be properly started to be delivered. And without having that British leadership under that Labour government, which also, by the way, put us on the way to achieving the 0.7 spend of our gross national income on aid and development. Do we continue to struggle with countries like DRC? Yes. Do I think, by the way, that in places like DRC we should listen more to diaspora communities in the UK than we do? Yes. I think this is one of the weaknesses of our development policy. Two things. One is there are people in this room who know DRC far more than I'll ever know it, and have family and friends there right now who know what it's really like on the ground. Secondly, if you look at UK government or DFID offices in countries, they tend to be accountable. They look upwards to senior civil servants and ministers. They don't actually have any accountability at all to the communities that they're meant to be serving in developing countries. So there's a lot of things that need to change. But we must be careful to recognise that Africa as a whole, sub-Saharan Africa as a whole, both on growth and poverty reduction over the last decade and more, is actually a success story, and we should celebrate that.
My name is Richard Watts. I'm one of the other councillors for this ward here. So firstly, I'd like to welcome everyone here to Torrington Ward in North Islington. I think there's something very special about Islington. Yeah, we're a very diverse borough. There are about 200 languages spoken in our schools. And actually this event, which is an event about the Congo, held in the Islington Chinese Centre, which used to be the hall for an Irish Roman Catholic church. There's something quite typical about the nature of our borough. Firstly, Jean-Roger, thank you very much indeed for organising this event. Jean-Roger, for people who don't know, is Britain's first councillor from a Congolese background, and we're very well, you know, it's fantastic that you are serving in this role. For people who want to get involved and find out more about the local party, there is this form here. So just please fill it in, give us your name, and kind of keep us in, and we'd be delighted to kind of keep you in touch with what we're doing here. And because the Labour Party is the party for international justice, as well as all the work we're trying to do to make Islington a fairer place too. But my question is, the current government talks a lot about changing the reason for international aid away from development and to essentially becoming part of the trading arm of UK PLC. So it becomes essentially the marketing budget for a lot of our companies, including, as to be said, many arms companies instead. Could you tell us a bit about the difference between the Labour and the Conservative-led government's approach to how we would see the aid budget in terms of developing countries like the Congo?
Thanks, Richard, and thanks so much for allowing us to come to your ward. And you do make a really important point about the diversity of this community, but the strength of that diversity. It's not a weakness, it's a strength, and it's something that we should celebrate and be proud of. You're absolutely right. I mean, since the current government came to power, there's been a view around that there is a consensus on development policy, because essentially they have agreed to honour Labour's commitment to spend 0.7 of gross national income on overseas development assistance. Well, there is a consensus on it being morally right that we spend 0.7, but that's where the consensus ends. I mean, frankly, they are massively increasing the amount of money that is being used, coming from DFID, being spent via the private sector. And they're doing that for ideological reasons. They're not necessarily doing it because it would achieve better results. We were always clear that tying aid was wrong morally and actually doesn't work. And what do I mean by tying aid? I mean by saying that we will give country X an amount of money providing they award contracts to British companies. We totally stopped that when we were in government. We totally disapprove of it. And this government are talking, in my view, although they deny it, language which suggests they're getting very close to restoring the notion of tied aid. How would we do things differently? Well, first of all, let me be clear. Jobs and growth and infrastructure are incredibly important. And you need to do that in partnership with the private sector. State institutions and NGOs can't do that alone. So we do need to work closely with the private sector. But it has to be a deal. A, it has to be open and transparent. And an incoming Labour government would only work with private sector companies that could assure us they were treating their workers properly, not just here, but through the supply chain in developing countries. They would have to assure us that they were not damaging the environment in developing countries. They would have to assure us they were paying proper amounts of taxation. So there would be very clear standards expected of the companies and the private sector organisations that we were engaging with. Now, of course, I don't have a problem with the notion of, as a country's economy grows and develops, why shouldn't British companies be able to go and take advantage of those markets like any other country, providing they're doing it in an open and transparent way? But we shouldn't mix up the role of aid and development and our business and trading interests. I think it's very, very important that we maintain a separation. And the fact that the current government are basically suggesting that the Department for International Development should become a wholly owned subsidiary of the Department for Business is, in my view, both morally wrong and is an accident waiting to happen in terms of getting embroiled potentially in all sorts of situations that would be not very good for our reputation as a country and is not in our national interest. So let me be clear. Business does have an important role in terms of development. If you look at any functioning state, it has effective government, it has effective civil society who can hold government to account, it has empowered communities and empowered individuals, but it also has a vibrant private sector. Where it doesn't have that, it's a country that will underperform. So we are pro-business. Wealth creation is absolutely crucial. You speak to anyone in DRC, they want private sector jobs, they want business, they want enterprise, they want entrepreneurship. And that's the case across many developing countries. But it has to be done in an ethical way, in a transparent way. And as Ed Miliband often says, we need a new kind of capitalism, a responsible kind of capitalism, which says the following, that profit is not a dirty word. But you should never ever claim that there is a choice between profit and ethics. We should say, both in this country and abroad, that businesses should be profitable, of course they should, but they equally are citizens, they're corporate citizens, and they should be expected to behave in an ethical way.
Okay. My name is Richard Mbali. There is a say that the past is gone. Eh? Don't think about the past, it is gone. We all know how Kabila was elected during the last presidential election in DRC. But today it's gone, we should leave it away. Let's think about the future. If it's happened that in the next general election in this country, Labour is back in power, what attitude Labour will adopt if it happens that the Kabila is trying to manipulate the constitution so that he represents himself for in 2016, the next coming election, what will be the attitude of the Labour?
I actually raised this question when I was there, and I said that for me, that is a bottom line. The existing constitution, I think, says that you can only serve 2 consecutive terms. My view is that if the current president tries to in any way to interfere with that, then the international community must come together and be tough. And there can be no wavering on that issue. And we've got to send, in my opinion, a very clear and strong message from now that that will be entirely unacceptable to the international community. And there would be, in my opinion, consequences and an impact on relations between the DRC and other governments if they make that decision. Totally unacceptable.
Thank you very much.
My name is Victoria. We all know, as Ian said, there is a problem of corruption in Congo. The government is corrupt, the system is corrupt. So there is nothing which will work in Congo, even economically or business-like. So my question is, what do you think about the UK government, parliament, or leaders or officials working closely with the Congolese diaspora, preparing for the alternative for the next, I don't know, elections or future, to prepare the diaspora, build close consultation with the Congolese diaspora in the UK, consult the diaspora, work closely with the diaspora to prepare even women. We are here, we are ready to be the next leaders in Congo. What do you think about working closely with us, please?
What I've announced recently is that from January 2014, I'm going to have a formal consultation process with the diaspora communities in the country about how we can change the relationship between them and DFID from May 2015 when we have a Labour government. And I think what's really important is that we go in there with a plan as to how the relationship with diaspora communities will be different. Because it's one thing to talk about engagement and consultation and having a nice chat. It's another to make sure that that influences change and that there is a genuine two-way dialogue. Now, will we always agree? No. Will there always be consensus? Of course not. But should the diaspora community, the relevant diaspora community, have a much greater voice in both determining UK development policy in relation to, in this case, the DRC, but also monitoring its effectiveness on the ground? Absolutely, definitely, people like yourself should have that kind of role. Now, the civil service will not like it, I'll tell you that now. The so-called professionals who work in aid and development won't like it, but I believe in it. If you believe in empowering people and communities here, then you need to reflect that in the way that you see policy across the board. And I have always believed that while I believe in a strong state, that's why I'm in the Labour Party and not in the Tory Party, I also believe in devolving power to local communities through councils and other bodies, but also devolving power down to local communities and neighbourhoods and people themselves, so they have a strong voice and have a significant amount of control over the decisions that affect their lives and the things that they care about. So you have my word that we'll start that consultation. I hope you'll be my maybe interlocutor,
Yep.
and there will no doubt be other people here as well, and we'll get a series of meetings done where we'll talk about what structural and institutional changes could we introduce when we get elected that would make the diaspora community feel they had a much greater level of say.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Theo. I'm the representative of UDPS in the UK. First of all, thank you very much for organizing the event. If I follow everything you said, I'm going to ask my question at the last part of my intervention. I want first to say that, okay, there is a missing point in your analysis. First of all, the problem in Congo is about the leadership, which can be the main one. The international community, including Labour, who has been in power for 11 years, since Kabila came into power, didn't do nothing. Labour closed his eyes. There has been human rights abuses in Congo, more than what has been known in the history of human rights abuses. What we Congolese, we want is you, the West, to back us on our choice. We made the choice in November 2011. Although you mention it, you say that, okay, even there was a fraud, the result will not change. But the Carter Center, who published that report, changed it. Still, I say that we give, please, here, please, the question is not more important, but the view of Congolese people They have to understand us. We don't come here just to ask a question. No, we want a dialogue.
This is why we're here.
Please.
We must know from the roots.
You can see from the audience, please, we are in democracy. You can see from the audience that the direct question, if I want to go for question, this guy, Mike, asked a question about the water, the tank, and everything. The way I understood the question is not the way the question was answered.
Yeah. True. Then
I don't want to, no, what I said, if you can allow me the time to talk, we are here to talk. You have to know, to understand. Congolese people have been demonstrating since November 2011. Notice from the Labour government. What we notice now is the Labour government.
what is your question?
Please, I'm coming. Allow me the time so you will understand my question.
Yeah.
Okay, give me 3 minutes. Let me finish. Don't interrupt me, please. First of all, Tony Blair is one of Councillor to Kagame. What the Labour government is doing to stop that guy. You want our voice, Congolese diaspora, as we are here, to join Labour. What are you proposing to Congolese that you will do once you are in power? We want a clear message from Labour to support the change in Congo. It's not about the money. It's not about the insecurity. The insecurity will end up if we have got a leader
Of our choice.
of our own choosing.
Yeah.
We have chosen Mr. Etienne Tshisekedi wa Mulumba. He won the election fair and square. But because of the interest, economic interest, the West closed their eyes. They don't want to see what is going on in Congo. The guy is killing people. You are backing him. The guy is just spoiling our mineral resources. Why? Because they are Anglo-Saxon enterprise in Congo. And then for you, it's good for business. People life is nothing. So what we want you guys to do for us is just to respect our own choice. Don't dictate the Congolese what to do. We want the money paid by British taxpayers, who are Congolese as well, among them, to be spent in a right way. So, I don't want to go about many questions. What I want you is just to respect our own view, and if you can just tell us, people here, if they join Labour today, is it going to be a point in your manifesto? In your manifesto, are you going to support, to put a point that you will be supporting the change in Congo? What we noticed, Ed Miliband, the Labour leader, doesn't even answer the letters. When you send a letter to him, no response. So how are you going to tell us that we can join the labor and you can change the stuff in Congo? Thank you.
And the first thing I would like to say is I've sat here and I'm willing to take any question, however difficult, however critical, however challenging. There's been no attempt to stop anybody asking difficult questions. So if anybody feels they have a question or a statement they want to make, however challenging, now's the time to do it this evening. So I hear it. Absolutely no attempt to shut people up in any way. I've not come here with a pre-prepared, I didn't know questions we're going to ask. And I'm doing my best to answer them. I thought I did answer this gentleman. If he didn't think I did, he should come back and ask me for clarification. Now let me just deal with the points that have been made. First of all, I have shifted Labour's position. And I've shifted Labour's position in a number of ways. The first way is to say that if I become the Secretary of State for Development in 2015, this country, your country, will be one of the top priorities for me. The DRC has never been a top priority for the British government. Let's be clear. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I have made it very clear directly to the government of Rwanda, to their foreign minister and their finance minister, that we will not tolerate anymore and turn a blind eye to their interference in the east of DRC. And if that were to continue, they would not, as a government, be receiving general budget support payments from the British government under a Labour government. Thirdly, the Constitution made it very, very clear, if the current president tries to cheat or fiddle with the tenets of the existing Constitution, my own view is that the international community should exercise zero tolerance to that behaviour. Now, what would we do? We would first of all recognise that alone Britain cannot do as much as we can do by seeking to influence others. So the first thing we would do is seek to bring the key players around the table and say, we need to move from a humanitarian aid agenda in DRC to a proper development agenda. Secondly, that agenda has to be led by the government, the legitimately democratically elected government of the Congo. Not by the West, not by anybody else, but if they have to provide leadership and they have to tell us what is needed and what they want. Obviously, there's also the question of security, making sure that there continues to be an effective force rather than an ineffective force, and that the political processes are not just signed on a piece of paper, but are implemented, and there is accountability for any country or any leader that flouts those political agreements. Now, other than that, can I say to you that we will not try and continue to be a friend of the government of Rwanda and the people of Rwanda? We will continue to try and be a friend to the people and the government of Rwanda. But the change is, we will not tolerate bad behaviour from them, and they mustn't mistake friendship for a blank cheque to do whatever they want. And you're right, sir, if you're angry about that, because in the past that's exactly what's happened. Because Rwanda has been seen as a great success story, because President Kagame has been a friend of Tony Blair's, but also David Cameron's, by the way, just as much, there has been a sense that they can get away with whatever they feel is right. I feel that when you can't help but empathise with what that country went through in terms of the genocide, one of the worst kinds of genocides in history, and we should all reflect on that a little bit. We should all reflect on it and not just dismiss it or mutter, because it is actually the loss of life, and the way that those lives were lost is dreadful. And we should respect that, and we should have deference to it. But it is not an excuse. Somebody referred to not living in the past. It is not an excuse for behaviour today which breaks every norm in terms of international law and international standards. So that is my reassurance to you. I can't say any more than that. In the end, you have to judge us by our actions, not by our words. In the process between now and 2015, I've said I will consult and engage with the Congolese diaspora community to make sure our policy reflects the different views that exist in that community. I met on my visit the leader of your party. I had an hour with him, a very, very fruitful and constructive meeting. I respect him. I think he's a remarkable man. Equally, I can't change what's happened in terms of the international community's decision at the time to say there were lots of irregularities, but they weren't sufficient to define the election as null and void. Now, you maybe feel that was wrong. You do feel it was wrong, and I respect that. And had I been around at the time, maybe I would have agreed with you. And maybe I would have applied pressure on our diplomats to say, not good enough. But I wasn't around at the time, and I can't change the past. What we can do, though, is try and do things differently in the future. And I think I've tried to set that out tonight in quite a clear, quite an honest way. I've not ducked any of the questions, and I've tried to be honest with you. That's all I can be.
Well, my name is Esther. Thank you. So, you know, when we were talking to us, I felt angry. I felt like crying. My heart was bleeding. It was soaking in tears. I know I'm a woman, and I know the agenda that is something that everyone wants me to talk about is maybe every child matters. Like you say, every woman matters. But you know what? One part I'm a woman. Another part I'm a Congolese. Another part inactive politician. Do you know, I know how much every child matters in this country, including my kids, black kids. I know how a woman matters in this country, including myself. But you know what? Me and the women in Congo, we are the same. The children here and children in Congo, they are the same. So do you know what? I know. You know, when you were talking, so many things were flooding in my head. But I know that as much as we can talk here, sir, I respect that you are here with us, but I know probably there is little that you can do. But however, allow us to talk. So when you go out from here, you have a great view of Congolese people. Maybe we are small here, but we represent Congolese diaspora. Let me start. Okay, we don't matter in Congo, women. Our children in Congo don't matter. Sir, I know, I know there is little you can do right now. You're not in power. But I know also that you can be a voice in that parliament for women in Congo, for children, as a mother, children in Congo. Now, where is the problem? So we have a different interpretation of what is going on in Congo. You and I, when I say you, I see the Western, I see the white, and I see us, the Congolese people. We see things differently because we are the one, when they hurt women in Congo, they hurt me. I have the right, my husband, that's my husband, by the way, my husband, well, but as democratic as he is, respects me. All the gentlemen here, they actually respect me. But women, me in Congo, I'm not respected or do not know. Number one. Now, when we talk the interference of Rwanda into Congo, is different interpretation here because Rwanda is in Congo through Kabila. We know that, and I'm sure you know it. Now, the problem, women, children, and everyone, even men are raped, killed. It's not just about women, it's not just about the kids. It's about everyone in Congo. But where does the problem lie? Like my husband said, is the leadership, the legitimacy. So you know, I know you know. When I say you, it's not you particularly, I see the government. I see Britain, you know it, and you said, I appreciate, I followed it step by step, and you mentioned it. Please, they want to stick, I will do. They want to stick with what they know rather than what they don't know. The problem is in Eastern, people are killed, women are raped, sir. The problem can only be resolved if we have legitimate government, if we have responsible and Congolese government. My question, sir, I know you're asking for the question, and so much, like I said, there were so many things coming through my head, but he has to know what is the problem, because we have different interpretation of the problem here. The problem is not the people being killed, raped, and what have you. The problem is illegal government in Congo, Rwanda government in Congo, supported by Britain, supported by everyone else. Sir, it's not a question that I want to ask. Maybe I just want to ask you something, not a question, a favor. It's never too late to do something. You particularly appreciate, sir, and thank you that you are here with us today. Let your time be worthwhile. I say that because I want to ask you, when you go back in the parliament, sir, be our voice. Our voice is to respect our choice in Congo, because that is the only way Congo will have stability. Yes. Let us govern ourselves. Let us choose our own leaders, president, and what have you. We are not terrorists. You said it, sir. But you know what? Leave us to choose, be our, I said I don't have a question, sir. Be our eyes, mouth, ears in the parliament when you go. Even one person will make a change. And I hope when you go out of here today, you will know, sir, that the problem in Congo is not about the Eastern and what have you. The problem is the Rwanda in Congo, supported by Britain and every other government, sir. Thank you so much.
I think that, first of all, obviously, I do see it as partially my role to ensure that the situation in east of DRC and DRC more generally is given a higher profile than it often has been in the past in the Parliament. I do see it as part of my role to do that, which is why I said to you that if we, 2015, when we get into government, I will personally guarantee you it will be one of my top priorities, because I feel personally very passionately about it. Not necessarily because the government would view it as being one of Britain's national interest priorities. I think that it's very understandable that you feel passionate about the last election and the legitimacy of the government. But I met many opposition parties in Kinshasa. And if I'm frank with you, until those opposition parties, to some extent, come together and learn to work together and unite, you're always going to have a problem. And you also can't deny the fact that many people did vote for the current president. Now, your argument is the majority didn't. There's a big debate to be had about that. I said in my opening remarks that my own personal view is that the diplomatic community should have been tougher on that election result, and there should have been a much clearer consideration of whether it was legitimate. That is my view, okay? But that's gone now. And so there is little point in dwelling on the past. I think that my only disagreement with you would be right at the end, when you implied that the only problem in DRC is Rwanda. That is absolutely not the case. Much of the problem is to do with the behaviour of the government and the politicians in DRC. Some of the problem is to do with the behaviour of Rwanda. But quite a lot of the problem is to do with the corruption, the weak leadership.
Please.
No. There's a political class. There's a political class in the DRC, which includes Kabila and the ruling party, but it includes other politicians as well. I know a little bit about the history of the country. And let's be clear, while I respect the current leader of the opposition, I think he's a good man, I think he's a decent man, I don't think he is a corrupt man in any way, we can't pretend that the problems of the country started with Kabila. In terms of women, the only thing I would say about that is this. The country will never, ever, ever move forward until it starts to change its attitude towards the rights of women and children. Any developing country that remains a so-called fragile and conflict state, you can trace that link to the way they treat women and children. And those countries that are still described as fragile and conflict-ridden are those countries where women have the least rights and there is the least respect for the rights of children. So that is, as you quite rightly said, at the heart, not a minor matter, at the heart of whether that country is going to be able to move forward in the future.
I would like to thank you, sir, for your time, because this shows that Congolese voice is being heard now, because we can see the beginning of people hearing our voices. And if I remember your last sentence for the introduction, you said that the community, the international community, want to work with the government now in Congo to change what is happening and things. So I would like to know which government is the international community going to work with? Because the government in place, if you see the system that the government is using is failing Congolese people. That's why you see anger in every one of us, and I hope you understand it. Because the first authority, Western authority, we talk about what is happening in Congo as unacceptable with French president. And I would like to know what is the relationship between, or if there is collaboration between international community and UN, which is in Congo, or is human rights got some kind of collaboration with international community? Because there's been report about what is going on in Congo. UN has been writing reports without getting any response from international community. Is international community collaborating with human rights or UN, which is in Congo for more than a decade now? And how can you support the government that has been failing its people for like 10 years? And what is happening in Congo after all this killing? Because we see in other countries, when 100,000 people are being killed, they call it genocide. But what is happening in Congo, according to UN report, is more than 5 or 8 million people. Is the international community ready to accept that there is a genocide going on in Congo?
Is that your question?
My question is, sir, his last sentence was, the international community want to work with the government in Congo. Which government? Is it the one failing its people or the next one? And which is going to be the next one?
And I think if anybody can make a difference, Mary Robinson can. And I'll certainly be meeting with her to talk about the situation. On your second question, it's very, very difficult. There has to be, in my view, political dialogue between all of the parties in DRC to try and agree on a constitutional settlement which is fair. And I made it clear that there should be no tolerance of any attempts to change the constitution and allow Kabila to serve a further term. I've made that very, very clear. But in the meantime, there is a government of DRC. You may not agree with it, you may not like it, you may think it's illegitimate, but there is a government. And the only thing the international community can do at this moment in time is to work with that government. Once that government is no longer there, of course, we will work with the elected government of DRC, whoever it is. But we cannot, let's be clear about this, we cannot, other than urge all of the parties to sit down and talk, to try and put party political differences to one side and work in the interests of the country. We can't sort of arrive there and tell them who the government's going to be. That isn't appropriate, and we just can't do that. So, as well as pointing the finger always at others, I think you should say sometimes to the political elite in your country, you have responsibilities here. State institutions up and running and working. And that's why we have to work with whichever government is in place, because that government controls, at the moment, the state institutions. Now, when you say we've ignored or imply we've ignored the excesses of Rwanda and its behaviour in DRC, I think that's totally unfair. Until recently, it would be an absolutely valid criticism that the world has turned a blind eye to the fact that Rwanda has been interfering in the DRC. But in recent times, it's actually been Britain that led the world in suspending budget support to the government of Rwanda. It's the Labour Party which said, when the current government tried to change that position, that it was wrong, and as a result of that, they resuspended their budget support. So there has been a big shift in the international community's attitude. If you feel that shift should have come earlier, I have a lot of sympathy with you. I think it should have come earlier. But I can't change the past. I can only make sure that we behave better in the future.
I think we should be moving to the other topics such as security or development, because Ivan is the Shadow Secretary of State for International Development. This is an opportunity to ask those questions.
My question will be in relation to that. Is the Labour Party ready to work with Congolese people here present in the hall that we are not a party who support abuse? We are not a party who support all different type of rape going on in Congo. We are a political party that stands for freedom, liberty, and the social justice. In relation to that, we won't let anyone who doing things like that to be to left and the current doing that. So my question will be to give strong support to the Congolese people here today, to tell them the Labour Party, if Labour Party is elected again this time around, the Labour Party will work very strongly with Congolese people, and that the agenda for the Congolese the agenda for the international politics for the Congolese party from Labour Party is clear, that Labour is ready to support Congolese people. And are you ready to tell us here today that Labour Party is ready, especially your role within the party, to work with Congolese people in the diaspora if we are about to elect our own leaders for the upcoming election? Are you going to be ready to work with us on that question? That will be yes or no. And that would be credible if you can give us your view on that. And the last question will be in relation to the impunity that is carried on in Congo. And my understanding is people value Labour Party within our community. And this impunity is keep going on. You give your time by going to Congo, and you have a time to speak to the opposition leader, which is at the point that we should strongly support here today in the meeting. Now, are you giving us your strong point that you're going to carry on doing this work until you see the real change in Congo that will be supported by Congolese people, and the Congolese people should work together with the Labour Party and make sure these things happen for the future of Congo? Thank you very much.
I would like to, I think, make sure that people get the right information. The Congolese for Labor. This is an organization that was set up in this constituency. The Congolese, I think my colleague Richard Watt knows about this. And it started here in Islington. And then this is an organization that is making progress to become an affiliated organization to the Labour Party. So there shouldn't be any confusion. Congolese for Labour, that is the organization that the Labour Party, I think, knows. Congolese for Labour.
I mean, very quickly, yes, yes, and yes. We will work with anybody who believes in democracy, human rights, and is willing to come together and put history behind them and look at the best interests of the Congolese people. And to be clear, it's not my job to support one Congolese party or another. As long as people believe in democracy and human rights and a better future, it's my job to ensure those people have a voice and a say, and that the Labour Party ensures that that voice influences the Labour Party policy in the way that it deals with these issues.
I came to this event because I was told that we wanted to hear about you guys being in the Congo and then come to report about different development activity there. So I'm not a politician, I'm not affiliated in any party, as you mentioned at your introduction. So I'm an NGO worker, and I'm mostly interested in development. So my question is about what you mentioned, accountability, about especially defeat, because you are the Shadow Minister of Development. So I understand that you will oversee these kind of activities. So because when I go on the website of DFID and then check what they spend in terms of finance, in terms of development projects in the Congo, I don't really see the project they're talking about. A lot of money is spent, but we don't see the project. Is there any kind of way of checking or accountability to know exactly how they're spending the money? Because we understand they spend most of the money in paying people's salaries, and which are mostly British. We don't really understand how we can spend that money and saying that you have spent that money for the interests of the Congolese people. Is there any way that we can understand a clear way of accountability that we people as taxpayers can understand and control the way the money is spent? Thank you very much.
DFID claims that it's the most transparent governmental development agency in the world, and it keeps coming top of the list. I agree with you that when I go onto the website and try and make sense of some of the information, what they do is they put a load of information out there, but it's very hard to decipher exactly what's going on. So it's all right putting lots of information on a website, but unless it's done in a clear way, which measures results and outcomes and you know what's happening, it's very, very difficult. So what we can do is, if you get in touch with me after the meeting, we can ask some parliamentary questions to try and get as much information as possible about the way that the money is being spent. I think you're right to raise the issue. And I think one of the things that obviously I'm concerned about is in 2015, if we were to be elected, there has to be maximum transparency about how the money is being spent, so that people like you are able to tell me whether you think that money is really making a difference on the ground, or whether we should be rethinking the way we spend our aid money in DRC. I've already said, I personally think we spend too much on humanitarian assistance and emergency responses.
Thank you so much. I'm not going to ask any question. I'm sorry. I'm going to do some statement. Yes. First of all, I'm going to start by the development, which is really special for me right now. As you say, in response to what Mama just said about the consultation with the Congolese diaspora, I think last year we were involved in the research, which was conducted by Voice Across Borders. On the 20th of November, the launch of that report was done in the Parliament about the policymaker and the diaspora working for peace and development. That was a very good piece of work. I think it's going to be a very good thing for you to have it, read it, and do the follow-up with the Congolese community. On the light of that, I'm one of the members for the British Oasis Club in the British Embassy in the Congo. So in the light of that research we did with the Voice Across Border, we came up with the idea to bring solution, because solution is going to come from us, not from you. You don't know Congo. It's us. I do respect one of British culture. That is what one day I'm going to bring in Congo. Wherever way you go, they ask you, how can I help you? That is the question that you're supposed to ask us. And we are going to come up with, the answer, how you can help us. So your help is going to meet our urgent needs. That's why in the British Embassy in the Congo, we did a consultation, even here, with some of the Congolese people. We created 2 projects. The first one is Global Connection Builders. The second one is the Congolese, UK Congolese Diaspora House of Commerce and Development, so that we can monitor what the DFID is doing. Because a lot of money is going there, but on the ground there is nothing. And if you follow that research, you're going to see there is a gap between us, the diaspora, and the policymakers. We are not talking the same language. So this must change. We must work as a partners. That is the solution. That's why we have that UK Congolese House of Commerce and Development in place. Why the first project, which is a global connection builder? By listening to the councillor, listening to you, there is a lesson to learn here. It's really, I'm really disappointed to see you are British. In 2009, you didn't know about Congo. It was really amazing. Why? I cannot condemn you because nobody came to tell you about Congo.
Yeah.
But why a British cannot know about Congo in this century? Why 100 years ago somebody saved the Congo who is a British citizen, Edmond de Morel. So what is happening right now, by following what the councillor said, there is a lesson to be learned here. Why? If the Congo is suffering today, because we are bound for the repetition of history, because we didn't learn from what happened 100 years ago. The Congo is still suffering for the atrocity, the legacy of atrocity of mineral exploitation. 100 years ago, it was Britain who came to save us. Edmond de Morel, Kesman, Conan Wright. That is the history. Because we didn't learn from the history, that's why we are seeing what is happening here. Because the people who were the part of the solution of the Congo in that time are now the part of the problem. I'm going just to give you two examples. One of them you gave us about Tony Blair. He's working with Kagame. What kind of the advice is given to him? Secondly, in here, BBC News, one of a British businessman was interviewed in Goma by one of the BBC journalists about what is happening in Congo, and they are still exploiting the Congo. That British businessman said publicly on the media is not the moral savior of the Congolese people. If that man knew that we have something in common, which is the heritage history link between the Congo and Britain, this man could have felt the compassion to the Congo. Like you. You're supposed to learn from that. We must find that common denominator, which is the history link that we have, and learn from it so that we cannot repeat the mistake of the past. That is what I'm going to say to you. Thank you.
Let's meet. My name is Hamba. My name is Hamba Wanzola. Thank you for your precious time to be with us. I have one question to ask you, but before that, I want to raise 2 points. I did a research that I call Rediscovering the Hidden Wealth, the Changing Human Geography of Congo. I reproduced a book, this book. I've been in so many conferences with ministers. I worked with Tony Blair for 10 years. I worked with Miliband's office, Margaret Bucket, and Nick Brown office as civil servants. I was dealing with parliamentary questions. In this research, I have found so many issues that I call hidden wealth. There is a secret wealth going on over Congo. UN, IMF, World Bank, all that are organizations made to dump on Congo. This research has been from 15th century, and it's a tremendous achievement, according to experts who already read the book. I want to tell my fellow Congolese who don't know yet about the book. The book is published 2 months ago. It's on web. You can see on Congo Mikili, I think by tonight or tomorrow morning. The question is, I went to Congo to do a research over his Department for International Development. He mentioned Congo is corrupt, poverty, all that. The poverty in Congo is generated, is made by people. Yes. Civil war doesn't exist in Congo. It's a proxy war coming from outside and guided by 5 or 6 rich countries that he knows very well himself. My question is this. When I read the answer of the 17 May 2012 from Matthew Offord, your department wanted to send to Congo 7,900 million to support the Congolese government in 2012, just after the election. But the money has been refused by Congolese parliamentary people. What is your view about this money? Is this money back to England or the money still in Congo?
I've got a lot of questions. First of all, you said many different things. You said that there is, in Congo, there isn't an army. In Congo, there are so many stuff that make it look like a failed state. And then we've got opposition member or politician. We do know how they think. These people, these sort of politicians, they don't give a damn about us. That's the truth. So how would you? Because I know that you've got some room of maneuver in the parliament, in the international socialists. You know, you've got some close friends who are in power in France, whatever, and in different regions of the world who can play a role. How would you react? Because we cannot, leave our state. We cannot just start turning our back in our country. How would you react if Congolese people decide to overthrow the government? Would you support our government, or would you, go on and say, oh, we need sanctions? And I'm not talking about overthrowing the government in terms of revolutions. I'm talking about, for example, the coup d'etat. Yeah. How would you react to that? My other question is, Labour Party and different MP told us a lot, and they promised, they went and said, oh, listen, this is Congo, we're going to do this about Congo, we're going to do this. Recently, they said some about free and fair elections, and then some of my elders went to the parliament for that. And at the end of it, the election wasn't free, and then you said that if the election wasn't free, you ain't going to recognize the government. And at the end of it, you didn't recognize the government. And then, listening to you, you said that, changing the constitution is a bottom line. Is a bottom line. And you said that you're gonna be working with Congolese people. So why should we believe you? Why should we believe you now? Why? Why should we believe you? Because you did let us down. Why should we do so? Why? That's not my other question. Regarding the rape, I'm sorry, I have to say this. This question goes to local councillor. It goes to a local councillor. Britain is more cosmopolitan. It is a cosmopolitan country. It is a cosmopolitan country. We've got different communities.
Go on.
Yeah. We've got different. We've got different communities. Why not include African or Congolese or Ghana, whatever, studies into the education system of this country? When I was young, back in my country, we learned about Belgium, France, we learned about Britain. Why shouldn't you, because it's a local matter, go in and then argue for that case? Why shouldn't you do that? You've been saying that, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. Rwanda should stop interfering into the Congolese matters. But the way you're saying it, you said, we're going to do this. So I would like you to say, we're going to support Congolese people so that they can, they will do the job. No, you doing the job for us. Honestly, yeah, I'm there for the cooperation. I'm there for people to come in my country to work and to come with different ideas of technology in my country, okay, to come and work. But I also need people to give Congolese people some space, okay, some space, so that they can put their ideas into actions, and then if there is some gaps, you can fill in. Okay, I've got a lot to say, but I need to stop.
Thank you.
The first thing is that the principle of development is that we should be responding to your leadership, not telling you what to do. The slight difficulty in the Congo is it's not always easy to find a partner that will tell you what the country needs and wants. That is part of the problem. But you're absolutely right. Development should be led by the country themselves. And our policy should be partially influenced by the diaspora community, although what tonight has demonstrated is there are pretty big differences as well. Not everybody agrees on absolutely everything. Whether you can trust individuals, well, it's partially this. You only in the end can trust people by their actions, not their words. So you will trust me by my actions if we get elected in 2015 and we change our policies and we do things differently and we do things in a way which are consistent with how I've spoken this evening. I would say this, in 2008 to 2009, I was a junior minister, I wasn't the Secretary of State. I had limited capacity to provide the kind of leadership that you would want from a person who was running the department, if you like. But since I've had this job, I'm responsible now for, if you like, Labour's development policy in the entire world. And I've chosen to go to the DRC twice in the last 6 to 9 months. Now, there's many other countries, frankly, that I need to go to and should be going to. So that is an example of my personal commitment and focus on the issue. I've also been very outspoken and shifted my party's position on Rwanda's behaviour. That's not been done before. It's not been done by any other Labour politician. So trust me in terms of some of the things I've already changed, but in the end, judge me by my actions when in government in 2015 if the British people give us a mandate. I agree entirely with your comment about rape being a weapon of war only beyond 1994. It was not historically a weapon of war in the DRC. And that makes it even worse when you go to many other countries where gender violence is the norm, when there's impunity. That's been going on for centuries. There's absolutely no question, you're right. It has not been the norm in the DRC historically. It has been tied, it is post the genocide in 1994. The white paper that you refer to was a 2009 white paper. If you go on the DFID website and try and find it, it's the 2009 white paper. And there was a specific chapter in that white paper on how we need to work differently in conflict and fragile ridden states. And the case study that we used was DRC. Other points that have been made that I've not had the chance to respond to. The question of where is our money going? I think we need to be careful. First of all, a lot of our money is going to help the humanitarian catastrophe which is taking place in DRC. Now, can I guarantee you every penny of that money is being spent wisely? Of course I can't. Do I think it's a mistake to give the impression that all or most of that money is being wasted? I think it is a big mistake, because then the British people will understandably say, well, why should we give any money to that country at all? Having said that, I think we need to ask the tough questions of the existing government and the people on the ground who are administering our aid programmes. I don't believe they're corrupt. I do believe, though, that sometimes it is very difficult to see the link between the amount of money that goes in and change on the ground. And that's why many, many people are sceptical and cynical. Because if you don't see change on the ground, you will question what impact is that aid and development money making. So I do think we should be asking more questions, getting to the bottom of this. I challenged, as I said to you, Diffid, when I was out in DRC, on the issue of why is it that they aren't in the East, why isn't they aren't providing leadership, and I will continue to do that, as well as asking specific questions about the money. On the issue of Tony Blair, I mean, I think we need to be clear. Tony Blair does say, in private to Kagame, some pretty tough things, both in terms of his human rights record internally, but also in terms of what's expected of him, in terms of his relationship with the international community. Tony Blair believes that that is best dealt with in private dialogue with different world leaders. Now, I think that, you know, that is to be fair. I don't think you can criticise Tony Blair and others for wanting to support Rwanda. It seems to me that we shouldn't be, no, support Rwanda's people to have a better life, to have growth and poverty reduction. We should all want that. It's not a choice. It's not a choice. It's not a choice between the two countries. The people of both countries deserve to live a life free of war and conflict and a life free of poverty. And when I met those young people in Eastern DRC, what really impressed me about them was when I asked them what they wanted, they said peace and jobs. They had no enmity and no hatred towards their neighbours, but they did want a different relationship, a relationship based on peace and stability. And everybody has a right to expect that. No, I am not going to stand here and deal with hypothetical situations which would be highly irresponsible for any politician to stand here and tell you tonight what the British government ought to do in the event of a coup d'etat. And any politician who doesn't give you that answer is not being straight with you. It would be entirely irresponsible of them. So if your problem is about that, if that's your problem, then if that's your
Please,
problem,
you ask your question.
If that's your problem about the closeness to the Kagame regime, Mr Cameron and the Conservative Party, every bit as close, if not closer. Let's be clear about that. And the final point is, if the only problem the Congo has is Rwanda and Uganda, you tell me whether Rwanda are involved in the Congo, in large parts of the Congo, other than the East. Why is there poverty in those parts of the Congo? Why is there nothing happening for the people there in terms of health and education and assistance? Where Rwanda's nowhere. The East, yes. But what's happening in the rest of the Congo? Is that Rwanda's fault? Is that Uganda's fault? No. It's because you have a political class who has let the people of the country down. And you have to accept that this is a shared responsibility. The people of the country have been let down, yes, because the international community has not prioritised the DRC as much as it should have done. Yes, because the international community has allowed the neighbouring countries to get away with murder there. Yes. But also, your politicians and your leaders do not step up to the mark and take responsibility. And you shouldn't let them off the hook. They have a responsibility as well.
One is, you said you are not going to allow Kabila to change the constitution. What if he does? What are you going to do about it? My second question is, for there to be proper development, there must be a responsible government. The third one, and the last one is, you said the opposition parties are not coming together. They do. When they protest, they get killed. Kabila gets away with it. The international community doesn't do anything. Thank you.
Ask me about the Constitution. I mean, to be clear, first of all, I think that the world should come together and make it clear to Kabila that that would be totally unacceptable and that there would be consequences as a result of him doing that. What those consequences will be needs to be, the international community needs to come together and decide on whether it's sanctions, whatever the consequences, but we need to send the strongest possible message that it will not be tolerated and there will be a big impact on the government of that country if he seeks to interfere with the constitution. Secondly, you asked me, what can we do in terms of development if we haven't got a government to deal with? Well, that is one of the Congo's long-standing difficulties. The government of the respective country has to lead, not the donors. So we do need effective and strong government. But I think what tonight we have to be clear and honest about is, you cannot expect me, as a British politician, to take sides in terms of internal political differences. What you can expect me to do is say anybody who cares about democracy and human rights and a better future for the country that you care about, I am willing to work with. More than willing to work with, I am willing to listen and understand and accept the anger and the bitterness and the fears. I accept all of those things. But what I can't do is differentiate between different factions. I will make my own judgments. I've told you, we've shifted our policy on Rwanda and their interference in DRC. I've told you that I'm not happy with what DFID and the donors are doing in terms of the kind of support that's being offered and that's not making the kind of difference that it should be making. I've told you what I think, what we will certainly do if the current president tries to change the constitution. Now, beyond that, I think it's unreasonable of you to expect me to solve, frankly, the problems that have been prevalent in your country for a very, very long time. All I ask you to do is to work with me in the period ahead between now and the election so we can agree on the appropriate role for the diaspora community here to have an influence in British policy. But if you're asking me to kind of mediate between different internal factions, that is not a reasonable request of a British politician. I will do what I think is right in the end. I've listened to a lot tonight. I've learnt a lot, including the anger. I don't mind people being angry. I don't even mind people disagreeing with me. That's why we live in a healthy, vibrant democracy called Britain, and we should be proud of that. People may not agree with me. I don't mind. But please accept the good faith and the goodwill to do things differently than we've done previously. And also, and this is very, very important, not to just tinker around the edges, to make a real difference for those young people who said to me, peace and jobs, and for those women who told me how horrendous it is to experience the rape that they went through. Believe me, I don't want us just to tinker around their edges. I want us to lead the international community, to work with the Congolese, to achieve transformational, lasting change. No less. But in order to do that, there has to be a two-way trust. Trust does not come overnight. It doesn't come with one debate or some fine words in a speech. It comes over a period of time when you get to know people. You watch them work. You see whether they honour their promises and their commitments. That's all I can ask you. It's been a real privilege and a pleasure to be here. I have learnt a lot, and I'll go away and think about many of the things that have been said here. So thank you so much.
How did you find it?
I thought it was very, very lively and very important. It's important that people get the opportunity to say how they feel. People feel incredibly passionately about their country of origin. And we know the situation in DRC is very, very challenging. It's very difficult. People here have family and friends there. And the passion and the anger is a good thing. It's not something we should be afraid of. It's something that we should harness. We should harness in a positive way.
Was this your first meeting with the Congolese people?
It's the first meeting with the British Congolese community in such an organised way. Of course I've met with individuals, but this is the first time I've met with a significant group of people.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup ndeko nanga Jackson Kento andenge opesa opportunité na leka na média na yo nga na li Cllr Jean-Roger Kaseki esprit de guerre James Bond Never Die secrétaire général ya au conseil de la résistance congolaise na li combattant qui kokuta na Shadow MP ya Angleterre mais c'est Ivan Lewis tu es consolé makambo etali Congo tu es ici vérité que tolingi changement na Congo Angleterre za ko makambo développement to ko développer dans Congo te na président oyo azali incapable azali incompétent lack of vision lack of leadership yango to c'est vérité tolingi changement ekota na kata Congo tozali contre te bande ko na biso mso libanda mais to ko travailler ndenge ba allemand ba comment travailler na ba français mais ba respecter ba congolais ba respecter mboka na biso toza ko en 2016 Kabila a cause président te biso bana Angleterre toza ko s'organiser to ko bimsa leader na biso alors to yebisi que Angleterre ezala quand même fier pour ezali terrain moko résistance alors résistance bandi en Angleterre yango to tomboli mongo na biso monde bomba eyoki bazala quand même fier na biso ba congolais auto bimna kat Angleterre toza ba British Congolese malgré ton passeport British to yebisi vérité mais bande ko na biso bana Congo na makina ba congolais il faut la défendre bande ko na biso atrocité zaka na Kifute ezaka na Goma te ezana Bazaïr na Kasai na Équateur na Lubumbashi partout Congo mobimba to sengi Kabila azalate peuple congolais partout bozali boye ba yango bien que Kabila akokende na 2016 akokosaba démarche tout akochanger constitution te bana Congo to zala bomoko ba combattant to zala bomoko na France na Belgique na Allemagne to zala bomoko to tika kotuka komitukana to pesa accès na gouvernement opposition yani ya occupation te merci beaucoup courage bandeko ba combattant to kolonga ingeta c'est sergent mokre que c'est esprit de guerre James Bond never die.
Ben voilà, tu as assisté à la rencontre entre MP Nabiso, Louis, la communauté congolaise. Na mona ki ozalaki vraiment excité, il y a autour de mituna, mais na rencontre oyo, au tiré nini ya malonga pour la bande kono bazo lando siko l'émission Nabiso état des droits où les allées mission école kaka na site Nabiso www.topafricamagazine.net.
Ouais, mais c'est important pour na ba congolais bakutana toujours ensemble ba loba o na kasa motema na bango pour na au moins ba décider même ceux qui avaient nini na opposition ayoka misusu arozwa akeloba na kasa parlement et puis équipe ko changer la politique na bango mingi donc pour nous retirer quelque chose il y aura un unième forum au place tozui poto le bamakambo tozanango donc c'est bien payé kokuta na toujours na bande réunions donc c'est un peu ça et na roloba
merci tozui avinayo toleka toza ba vie bande réunions musu bazali awa moko la moko ayebisa biso nini attirer la rencontre merci
OK pas de problème merci
et pande ko la biso frère Jean-Claude ozalaki na kati ya meeting oyo ozalaki na rencontre oyo un débat houleux communauté congolaise diaspora bakutani na MP na biso shadow ya leba mais eloroni ya motuya au tiré na rencontre oyo.
Merci papa Kenjo. Ba discours e banda nango lelote e banda kala des années il n'y a rien de nouveau ici mais ce qui est vrai quand même pour associer bango na kati ba yeba ndenge makambo zotambo na mboka ndenge na moni réaction ya kina kata sale batu mitema vraiment kande zalaki makasi ba lobi ba koye koloba. Et là, bien on a la liberté d'expression, zalaki ndo muta s'exprimer, abimisa zona kata motema. Et là, bien on a monika kayangoana. Mais ba discours c'est le gars bloqué loba en France, loba nango, na Belgique, loba nango, en Angleterre, en États-Unis. Il y a rien de nouveau quoi.
Parmi les organisateurs, tozalaki na conseiller na biso ya Islington, ya Tollington Ward, monsieur Jean-Roger Kaseki. C'est lui qui a organisé cette rencontre. Nous avons une ou deux questions à lui poser. Conseiller, Lelo Tomoni, MP, a approché communauté Nabiso, communauté Basololi, communauté Bazagi Naposa Baloba, librement. Est-ce que rencontre Yaboye dans les prochains jours et Kozala Lisusu pour que topé sa communauté, la voix, Baloba, va s'exprimer comme ils veulent.
Tout d'abord, eza événement munene, ndenge salemi, pambate, sokotali na histoire ya mboka oyo, na biso na Congo, ba autorité britannique bazalaki ko approcher bisoté. Le fait que les autorités britanniques commencent à nous approcher. Et ali signe moko munene. C'est-à-dire que balingi bisona bango totonga relation moko ya sika. Totonga relation où peut permettre que peuple britannique, le peuple congolais, tozala na toloba friendship, tozala na amitié ya sika parce que Congo ndenge ezali wana ezali mboka moko esengeli kozala na ba allié ya makasi sur le plan international. Alors réunion à lelo ezalaki lokola donc likambo moko ya sika ebandi ya biso ba congolais na ba anglais conversation moko ya sika ebandi na 21e siècle pona totala ndenge nini Congo asengeli kozala na friendship na ba amitié na bamboka ya makasi bamboka eza na puissance lokola Royaume-Uni en tant que pays oyo ezali na siège na Conseil de sécurité des Nations Unies et ezali membre ya G8 et puis Royaume-Uni ezali plaque tournante, il y a tout ce qui se fait en ce moment dans le Grand Lac et Afrique. Et puis en prévision de tout ce qui arrive, dynamique, il y a changement dans la région parce que je crois que la promotion de la paix est en importance, le désarmement, la milice sur la région, la désarmer, et la milice M23, la rebelle Hutu, et l'armée de résistance du Seigneur. Mai Mai, milice nyonso ekozala désarmée, c'est-à-dire que tokolongwa na environnement ya minduki pote tokota na environnement ya kimia isika parler développement, langage asika ekozala développement, la paix, le développement de la région. Donc rencontre à Lelo, événement à Lelo ezali malamu mingi pona bana Congo, surtout bana Congo oyo bazali na mboka lokola Royaume-Uni sika ndenge na uti koloba donc dynamique ya Afrique à Grand Lac ezali ko salema donc diaspora congolaise na Royaume-Uni ezali une importance mingi pour l'avenir du Congo.
Tokanga otango molaite parce que rencontre oyo ezibiso plus de 3 heures makambo ebele ezali ya osala. La fois prochaine, pour introduire, à cette occasion, introduire émission Nabiso, Combo, État des droits, na État des droits, ça, moto, azala libre, yako s'exprimer, moto, aya na interview, aya koloba, oyako koloba, na ko fingate, na respect mutuel, na respect, oyo, yaba droit nyonso auto zala na kati ya État des droits, émission wana, ego banda koleka na site Nabiso, www.topafricamagazine.net. Je vous dis bye bye.